Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, we're making it comfy with a lovely crop sweater. This cozy make features a wavy chevron design, is made raglan style, and favorite part, these sleeves. Speaking of short sleeve, long sleeve, balloon sleeve, or no sleeve, we've got you covered. We have hundreds of crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 400 grams of yarn, and that's 690 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 5.5 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us how many pillows you sleep with. I sleep with 2.5 pillows. Details for the giveaway down below. We are using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook, and we're all going to start with a prep chain for our collar. And we're all going to start by making a chain in multiples of 12 that reaches from mid collarbone across our chest to mid collarbone. So we are back. I have just finished up the first portion of my chain. Now this is going to be our front panel. I have a total of 24 chains, and this is just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. I did insert my stitch marker into that last chain just so I can remember what number that was, but now from here we're going to get started on our shoulder. So this is going to be in multiples of 12 as well, and this is going to measure from mid collarbone up and over our shoulder to our back. I am back with the shoulder portion of my chain. Now this was another chain 24 for me, so this is an additional 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here, the chain for the back panel is going to be exactly the same as the front panel. So for those of you that have my numbers, 24 for the back panel, and then our shoulders are going to be the same as well. So for me, another 24. Now mine just so happens to be a total of 24 for each section, but if your front and back panel numbers are different than your shoulder numbers, then that is completely fine as well. Now this is just the prep chain to see how many rows we need to do for our collar once we get started on that. But I would suggest to make the entire chain just to make sure that this chain can fit over our head. But once we can, I'll meet you guys back so we can get started on the actual collar portion. But make sure that you write down or remember the amount of stitches that you have for your front panels and shoulders, back panel, and other shoulder as well. Alrighty, so we are back. We have just figured out that the entirety of our prep chain fits nicely over our head, and now we're going to get started on the actual collar portion. Now the prep chain isn't going to be used for the actual piece, so I went ahead and took that apart, and now we're going to take our same category 4 yarn, my same 5 millimeter hook, and we're all going to start by making a chain the height that we'd like for our collar to be. Now I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 4. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And into the chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. So just insert your hook into that chain. There we go. Then once we have those 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and gently pull through both of those loops. We want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly. Let's do this again. Into that following chain, insert, yarn over and gently pull through both of those loops. And that's it. We're going to continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row is going to be too tight to work into. Now once we have our row 1 complete, we're now just going to be doing back loop slip stitch rows. So chain 1, flip your work, Find that last stitch from our previous row and insert into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us. Then again, yarn over and gently pull through everything. Once more into that next stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over, and pull through everything. Continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and then put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. Continue to repeat this row with absolutely no increases and no decreases until we have a total of 12 rows, and then I will meet you guys back no matter what size we're making. Alright, so we are back, and we should all have a total of 12 rows no matter what size we're making. And just to count that out together, here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now, for this collar portion, we're all going to want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the edge of our 12th row. And that is going to be just so we know where the chevron portion is going to start and end. So make sure that you're just inserting your stitch marker into the edge of this row and into the edge of every 12th row after this as well. So I'm actually just going to continue on with my back loop slip stitch rows until I have the same amount of rows as total chains that I made for my front panel. So for those of you that have my numbers, I had a total of 24 chains for my front panel. So I will meet you guys back when I have a total of 24 rows. Alrighty, so I am back. I now have a total of 24 rows completed, which was the same amount of chains that I made for my front panel. Now since that is in multiples of 12, I did insert my stitch marker into the edge of this row as well, but as you guys can see, I have 2 stitch markers into that side row. So the purple ones are the ones that I'm inserting into every 12 rows. The blue one, we're just going to have 4 of these secondary colored stitch markers, and that is just to block off where the front panel is, the shoulder, back panel, and then the other shoulder. So since this was the same amount of chains that I made for my front panel, I inserted my secondary colored stitch marker. Now from here, I'm just going to continue to do my back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases until I have the total amount of chains that I made when we're making the prep chain for our collar together. And again, we want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into every 12th side row, and then inserting our secondary colored stitch marker whenever we reach the same amount of chains that we made for our front panel, our shoulder, back, and other shoulder as well. I'll meet you back when we have the entirety of our collar completed. Alrighty, so we are back. I have just finished up the entirety of my collar. I have the same amount of rows as chains that we made for our prep row, and now we're going to seam everything together. But as you guys can see, I do have a stitch marker into every 12th row, and then also my secondary colored stitch marker into the same amount of stitches that we had per section. So as an example, front panel, shoulder, back panel, shoulder. Now from here, we're going to fold it in half and insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and back panel. So now that our hook is in through both the front and the back panel, we're going to yarn over, pull through everything, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So we're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel, and we're going to insert only into that front loop. Then finding that next stitch into the back panel, we're going to insert into that back loop only. And then once we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. Now this seam is going to look like another slip stitch row. Let's do this again. Into the next stitch into the front panel, insert. Next stitch into the back panel, insert, yarn over, and pull through everything. And we're just going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. So now that our seam is completed, we're now going to do a single crochet row along the edge of our collar. So we're going to switch out to our 5.5 millimeter hook. And then all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row, making sure that we're bringing our stitch markers with us. So getting this started, we're all going to chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch. And then we're all going to start by finding that first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert into that top loop, which is this divot. Insert with a single crochet. And as you guys can see, my stitch markers are on this side, so I'm going to bring both of my stitch markers into that stitch. Now if your stitch marker is on this side of our collar, then lucky you guys, just insert your stitch markers into the same stitches. Now let's do the next one. This raised row is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. Again, this is my following side row, which is this divot. Find that top loop and single crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue on with our single crochet row, making our way all the way around, making sure that we're bringing our stitch markers with us. We should end up with the same amount of stitches as rows that we have for the collar, and then I will meet you back right after we slip stitch into that chain space. Alrighty, so we are back. Our single crochet row along the edge of our collar is complete. Now just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this collar can stretch. So once when it's completed, just try our piece on, making sure that it can still fit around our head. Now if it's a little bit too tight, we'd use some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, we'd use some stitches with a tighter grip. But now from here, we're going to get started on the prep row for our chevron detail. Now this is going to start off the same for every size. Right after we have slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to chain 3. Now I'm going to be flipping my work because as you guys can see, I have stitch markers on this side of my chain 3 and I don't want to be working in that direction. I want to be working in the other direction where the stitch marker is 12 stitches away from our chain 3. So I am going to flip my work. Now getting this portion started, it is going to be the same for everyone no matter what size we're making. So getting this started, we're all going to yarn over, preparing for a double crochet, and then we're going to insert our hook into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in. Now that chain 3 does count as a stitch. So into that same stitch, we're going to insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Then from here, we're going to do another double crochet into that following stitch. So yarn over, into that next stitch, pull through 2, pull through 2, and then we're all going to be doing 3 half double crochets, so 1 half double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So yarn over, insert, pull through all 3, into the next one, yarn over, into the next, pull through all 3, and then one more, yarn over, insert, pull through all 3. Now right after our 3 half double crochets, we're going to be doing 3 single crochets. So into that next stitch with 1 single, into the following stitch with another single, and then into the following stitch with yet another single crochet. Then we're going to work our way back up to the taller side of our stitches, and we're going to do 3 half double crochets again. So yarn over, into that following stitch with 1 half double, following with a second half double, and then following with a third half double. Now we should all have 1 available stitch right before our stitch marker. Into that available stitch, we're going to insert with a double crochet. And then into each of our stitch marker stitches, we're going to be doing an increase of 3 double crochets. So I'm going to take the stitch marker out for now, but don't put it too far. And then insert into that next stitch with 1. Into that same stitch with a second. And we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into that second stitch to know where the point is. And then with a third double crochet, that is our increase of 3 doubles. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat this, making our way all the way around. So we're just going to do the following set of stitches again together. So right after that increase, into that next available stitch, 1 double crochet. Into the next 3 available stitches, 1 half double crochet into each of those. Now that those half double crochets are complete, 3 single crochets, 1 into each of the next 3 stitches. Then when those single crochets are completed, 1 half double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches again. Then right after those 3 half doubles, 1 double crochet because we should have 1 available stitch right before our stitch marker. And then into our stitch marker stitch, insert with an increase of 3 double crochets. Now I have both of my stitch markers into there, and I will be making sure that I insert both of my stitch markers into that middle stitch. So into that following stitch with 1 double, into that same stitch with another double, and don't forget to insert your stitch markers into that middle stitch. And then another double crochet into that same stitch. That is our increase of 3 double crochets. We're going to continue on with this, making our way all the way around, and then I'll meet you guys back once we make our way all the way around. Alright, so we have made our way all the way around with our first prep row for our body. Everyone's last stitch should be a double crochet into that last stitch. Now we don't want to miss out on this increase since this is where our chain 3 is, so we're going to be inserting 1 more double crochet into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in, and this is going to be an increase as well. So we should have all ended right after our last double, so we should have just 1 double crochet here. So yarn over, into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in, insert with another double crochet, and now this row is complete. Then from here, we're going to slip stitch into that third chain that we made when we got started on this row. So we're going to insert, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. And now this row is complete. Now let's get started on our actual chevron portion. So we're all going to chain 3 and flip our work. So what we're all going to want to do is into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in, we're going to do 1 back loop double crochet. So yarn over. Into that first stitch's back loop, we're going to insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And then from here, this portion is going to be the same no matter what size we're making. We're all going to do 1 back loop double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches as well. So yarn over into that first stitch's back loop with 1 double crochet and continue until we have a total of 5. So we are back. I just did my 5 double crochets, but if we're counting that first back loop double crochet, we should have a total of 6. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we're going to do a double crochet 3 together. So how we're all going to do that is yarn over. Insert your hook into that following stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Again, yarn over into that following stitch's back loop, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through 2, and then once more yarn over into that next stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 for a total of 4 loops on our hook. Once we have those 4 loops, we're all going to yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. And that is our double crochet 3 together, and we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of this stitch so that we know where the decreases are going to be. Now from here, working our way back up towards our next stitch marker, we're going to start with 1 back loop double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. So yarn over into that next stitch with 1 back loop double crochet and continue until we have a total of 5. Now that we have our double crochets, we're at our stitch marker, and now we're going to do an increase of 3 back loop double crochets. So into that following stitch marker stitch, insert with 1, with 2, and then with 3 double crochets. And don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that second double crochet that we made, because that is the middle of our increase. So all together, we're just going to make our way over to our following stitch marker stitch just to make sure we have it down, and then it's going to be a complete repeat. So we're all going to start with 1 back loop double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. Now that we have our 5 back loop double crochets, we're now going to do our double crochet 3 together. So yarn over, insert your hook into that next stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, and pull through 2. Yarn over again into that next stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, and then once more yarn over into that next stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4, and don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that stitch. Then 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch until our following stitch marker is reached. So our double crochets are complete. We are at our stitch marker stitch, and insert into that stitch marker stitch with an increase of 3 back loop double crochets. So there's 1, there is 2, and then there's 3. Don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the middle of that increase, so into that second double crochet that we made. And that's it. From here, we're just going to continue to do this, making our way all the way around, and then I will meet you back at the end of this row. So we are back, and our row 1 is complete. Now this single crochet row and the following row that we did does not count as our first 2 rows. Those are just our prep rows. The one that we just finished counts as our first official row. Now we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into that same stitch as our chain 3 to complete this increase of 3 double crochets. And once we have that into place, we're all going to chain 3 and flip our work to get started on our row 2. So now that we have flipped our work, we're going to get started on the first half of this increase that we have over here. And for every even numbered row, we are going to be doing an increase of 5 back loop double crochets. So like how our previous row did an increase of 3, we're now going to be doing an increase of 5, but since we're just working on the first half of this increase, we're going to start with 2 back loop double crochets into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in. So yarn over into that back loop with 1 back loop double crochet, and then into that same back loop, a second back loop double, and then from here, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch until we are 1 stitch right before our middle stitch marker stitch. So we are back, we put 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, and we should have 1 stitch left right before our stitch marker stitch. So I'm going to take this out for now. And now we're going to do a double crochet 3 together within the back loops again. So yarn over, next stitch is back loop, pull through 2. Yarn over again, into that next stitch is back loop, pull through 2. Yarn over once more, next stitch is back loop, pull through 2. For 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4. Be sure to insert your stitch marker into the top of that decrease. Then from here, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch until we reach our stitch marker. Now when it comes to doing the increase for every even number row, it's going to be an increase of 5 back loop double crochets. So I'm going to take out my stitch marker for now, and into that stitch marker stitch, insert with 1, insert into that same back loop with 2, same back loop with 3, and into that third, make sure that you're inserting your stitch marker into the top of that stitch so we know where the middle is. And then into that same back loop with 4, because remember this is an increase of 5. And then into that same back loop with our 5th back loop double crochet. Then from here, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, and when we have 1 stitch left right before our stitch marker, do a back loop double crochet 3 together, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, and then an increase of 5 back loop double crochets. Continue doing this, making our way all the way around, and then I'll meet you back at the end of the row. We are back, and we have made our way all the way around with our row 2. Now I did leave the last increase of 2 back loop double crochets to do with you guys, just to remind you that we always want to make sure that we're finishing off this increase. Since this is an even number row, for every increase that we did, it was an increase of 5. So since we started off this row with an increase of 2 here, we're going to make sure that it completes 5 stitches by doing an increase of 2 back loop doubles into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in. So just insert with 2 back loop double crochets to make sure that we're not missing out on this increase. And then we're going to slip stitch into that third chain. And now our row 2 is actually complete. From here, it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows. Now I'm just going to get started on the following 2 rows with you guys, and I'll let you do the rest on your own. So right after that slip stitch into that third chain, we're going to chain 3 and flip our work. Now getting started on a repeat of row 5, all of the increases are just going to be an increase of 3. So starting off every odd number row, we're going to start with 1 back loop double crochet into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in. And since that counts as our first increase, we're going to be putting 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch until we are 1 stitch right before our stitch marker stitch. We should all have 1 stitch left right before our stitch marker. Now we're going to do a double crochet 3 together. So yarn over, into that next stitch is back loop, pull through 2, yarn over, next loop, pull through 2, yarn over, next loop, pull through 2. For 4 loops, yarn over, pull through all 4, and don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that stitch. Then 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch until we reach our following stitch marker stitch. We are at our following stitch marker stitch, which is the increase stitch marker. And now, since this is an odd number row, we're going to do an increase of 3 back loop double crochets. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3, and don't forget to insert your stitch marker into the top of that second double crochet that we made. And that's it. We're just going to continue to repeat this, making our way all the way around. And don't forget to close off this row with a last back loop double crochet into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in to finish off this increase. Then I'll meet you guys back to do our following row. Alright, so we've made our way all the way around with our row 3. So right after we have finished up that increase from our row 3, slip stitch into that third chain, we're going to chain 3 and flip our work. Now since this is an even number row that we're working on, all of our increases are going to be an increase of 5. So into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in, we're going to start with the first half of this increase, which is 2 back loop double crochets. So there is 1, and then into that same back loop there is 2. Now from here, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch until we are 1 stitch left right before our stitch marker. We are at our stitch marker. So then into the following stitch marker stitch and into the stitch right after that, do a back loop double crochet 3 together. Then 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch until we reach our stitch marker stitch on this side. We have reached our increase stitch marker stitch. Like I said, since this is an even number row, we're going to do an increase of 5 back loop doubles. Don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that 3rd double crochet for that increase. And then from here, continue to repeat this, making our way all the way around. And don't forget to finish off this increase at the end. Now just continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until this portion that we have can lay over the edge of our shoulder. And I'll meet you back right after an even numbered row. So I am back with the shoulder portion of my piece. I have a total of 6 rows, and counting from the edge of my collar down to the point, I have roughly 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters. Now from here, all we're going to do is continue to repeat our odd number rows, so those are the rows with the increase of 3s at the points, until our secondary colored stitch marker stitches can reach comfortably underneath our underarm. So we are starting to form that right now. I will meet you guys back right after an odd number row so we can continue on with our piece from there. Alrighty, so we are back. I have just finished up the portion that forms our underarm, and I have a total of 10 rows. Or measuring from the edge of our collar all the way down to one of our points, I have just about 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters. Now we just want to make sure that we're trying on our piece at this point and making sure that our stitch marker stitches that are separated for our front and back panel can comfortably touch each other underneath our underarm, making sure that the armhole or the body portion isn't too tight. But once when everything is into place, we're now going to get started on the body portion. So we should have all slip stitched right after that 3rd chain, and now we're going to connect the front and back panel together. So that's going to be fairly easy. What we're going to do is making sure that our secondary color stitch marker stitch is on top of each other on both sides. So my hook basically counts as one of my secondary colored stitch marker, and here's my next one, and then making sure that the other side is aligned as well. Then all we're going to do from here is a chain 3, which is going to count as our first stitch for our next row. But we're going to be inserting our hook in through both the front and back panel now. So just insert your hook into our secondary colored stitch marker stitch, and then I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook, so that's basically connecting both the front and the back panel. And all I'm going to do is pull through and start with a chain 3. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and now we're just going to continue on with our chevron detail. But we do want to make sure that we're working in the opposite direction from our previous row because we want to keep up with the ribbing. So let's take a look at the top of our loops from our previous row. So as you guys can see, these are the stitches from our previous row. Each of our stitches is going to be in a teardrop shape. So there's going to be a pointed end and then a rounded end. The rounded end is the direction that we're working in for the previous row. So since this is my rounded end and this is my pointed end, we were working in this direction for my previous row. Now in order to keep up with the ribbing, we're going to be working in the opposite direction. So I'm going to be working in this direction. So this first row is going to be the same way that we did our increase row when we were doing the shoulder portion. So these are going to be the rows with the increase of 5 into our stitch marker stitches. So just to do this first one together, since that chain 3 does count as a stitch, into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in, we're going to start with the first half of this increase. So we're going to put 2 double crochets into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in. Then from here, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch until we have 1 stitch left right before our stitch marker. Mine's not in there right now, but pretend that it is. And then we're going to do our double crochet 3 together. 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, making our way back up, and then do an increase of 5 back loop double crochets. Then we're going to continue this until we are worked into the stitch right before our secondary colored stitch marker stitch. Alrighty, so we have worked our way all the way across until we are worked into the stitch right before our secondary colored stitch marker stitch. Now from here, we're going to connect our front and back panel together. So this is going to be fairly simple. It's all going to start with a double crochet worked in through both the front and the back panel. So yarn over, into our stitch marker stitch, insert into that back loop, and then also insert your hook into the stitch marker stitch within the back panel as well, and then double crochet per usual. And now our front and back panel are connected, and now we're going to flip our work. Once we have flipped our work, the double crochet that we did that connects both our front and back panel will count as one of our stitches because this is a point, so we need to do our increase of 5 back loop double crochets. So yarn over and then into the same stitch that our double crochet that's connecting our front and back panel together is into, we're going to do an additional 4 double crochets because remembering that that stitch counts as one of our stitches. So there is 2 that we just did, 3, and don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that third stitch to know where the point is, 4, and then 5 all into that same stitch. And then from here, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, and we're just going to make our way all the way across the same way that we did the front panel. So increase of 5 into our increased stitch marker stitches and everything. Once we reach our last stitch, we do want to make sure that we're finishing off this first increase that we did right here into our chain 3, and then slip stitch into that third chain, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, so we are back, and our first row for the body portion is complete. Now from here, all we're going to do is basically repeat our previous row. So this is going to be an increase row. So every increase stitch marker stitch that we have, it will be an increase of 5 back loop double crochets. Pretty much the same way that we did our increase rows for the shoulder portion. We're just going to continue on with those increase rows until this becomes the width of the piece that we want. Now once we have that, I will meet you guys back so we can just work straight into the body from there. Alrighty, so we are back. I now have a total of 13 rows, and this is just about as wide as I would like for the body portion to be. So from here, all we're going to do is our non-increase rows. So the non-increase rows are the ones where once we reach the increased stitch marker stitch, we just do an increase of 3 back loop double crochets while still maintaining the double crochet 3 together at our decreased stitch marker stitches. We're just going to continue to maintain this row until we get the total length of the top that we want. So you can make this cropped, full length, or even a dress if you want. And then I will meet you guys back once we have the entirety of the body portion finished up, and then we can do the sleeve together. Alrighty, so I am back. I have just finished up the entirety of my body portion. Now I have a total of 17 rows, and my total length from the edge of my collar down to one of the points is roughly 12.5 inches or 32 centimeters, and I did want mine to be cropped, so I am all done. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut. Now from here, we're all going to get started on our sleeve, and as you guys can see, I already have one of my sleeves all finished up. So we're going to do the second one together because they're both going to be done exactly the same way. So we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. And by right side out, I mean the seam that we did for the collar is along the outside, since that does look like another back loop slip stitch row. And then we're going to be inserting our hook into the same stitch that both the front and back panel are coming out of into our armhole. So some of you may still have your stitch markers into your stitches. If not, then that's completely fine as well. We're just going to take a look at the bottom of our armhole and find that stitch that the front panel's in. So the stitch will be occupied, insert your hook, and then into the same stitch that the back panel is in as well, that will be occupied as well. Insert your hook, and then insert your yarn onto your hook. We're going to pull through and start with a chain 3. Now from here, we're basically going to be doing the same thing that we've been doing this entire time. So the increases will be an increase of 3 back loop double crochets, and we're going to have to start it with an increase as well. But we do need to make sure that we're working in the opposite direction from our previous row to keep up with all the ripping that we have going on. So taking a look at the top of our last armhole row, we're going to take a look at the top of the stitches and see which direction the teardrops are working in. As you guys can see, the curved portion of the teardrop is worked in this direction. So for this following row, I'm going to be working in the opposite direction to make sure that we have the same ribbing as the body. So just to get this first row started, since it is basically going to be a repeat, we're all going to start by putting 1 double crochet into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in. That counts as the first half of this increase for this portion. And then from here, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch while maintaining the double crochet 3 together at the decreased stitch marker. And then at the increased stitch marker, an increase of 3 back loop double crochets. We're going to continue this, making our way all the way around. And once we do make our way all the way around, don't forget to insert one back loop double crochet into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in to complete this increase over here. Then I'll meet you back once our row 1 is complete. Alright, so we've made our way all the way around with our first sleeve row. Now from here, we're basically just going to repeat this until we get the total length of the sleeve that we want. So we're not going to have any additional increases or decreases, just continue on with this until you get the full length, short sleeve, 3/4 length sleeve, whatever you guys want. Once we have the full length, do a chain up 1 and cut. Alright, so I am back and the entirety of my sleeve is complete. I have a total of 33 rows. My length is roughly 22 inches or 56 centimeters because I did want this to cover the palm of my hand, and I am all done. Once we have one sleeve all finished up, go ahead and repeat the same thing that we did for the other side. And now that both of our sleeves are all finished up, we are all done. Last thing we have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all the next one. Bye!